I haven't thought about this since then. So it's like one of those precious things in your soul. So she said, you're in Nashville and you're going to Onsite. And she called somebody and she said, just walk down to this hallway and down to this floor. And I got there and there was someone from Onsite waiting in a car. And they just hugged me. And I don't even remember getting in the car, barely remember the drive. And I remember showing up. And I stepped out of this car in the hills of Tennessee and just swept. Met you. I remember seeing you come over the sunset like in a movie. You might have even been on a horse.
So the very first thing that I might try to do if somebody is at their worst is, in my mind, is like reverse roles.
Mm.
And suddenly I don't see a desperate human trying to claw their way back to life. I look over there and I look at myself sitting there at one point in my story.
Hey friends, Lights On, sponsored by Fabric by Gerber Life. It's life-term insurance that you can get done from wherever you are right now. You don't need to come to an office. You can schedule a call today and be covered in under 10 minutes with no health exam required. So if you have kids, especially if you have kids and you're young and healthy, the time to lock in this low rate is right now. So even if you have life insurance through your employer, by the way, it might not offer enough protection for your family, and especially if your job changes, you don't want your life insurance to change. So Fabric has really flexible, high quality policies that fit your family and your budget, like $1 million in coverage for less than $1 a day. That's a lot of coverage. So Fabric has partnered with Gerber Life, who's been trusted by millions of families like yours, like mine, for over 50 years. There's no risk, 30-day money-back guarantee. You can cancel it any time. So there's a reason they've got thousands and thousands of five-star reviews. And they have designed this for busy parents who care deeply about the most important things. This includes way more than life insurance, by the way, things like free digital wills, access to investment accounts to invest for your kids' future, all that good stuff. So if you're like my wife, Lozzie, who loves to manage the entire world from her phone, you will love the way they set this up. So join thousands of families and trust Fabric to help protect your family. You can apply today, just minutes at meetfabric/lightson. Meetfabric.com/lightson. And these policies are issued by the Western Southern Life Assurance Company, and they're not available in certain states. So price is subject to underwriting, all that good stuff, health questions, all of that you can inquire about today. So check it out. Lights On, proud to be sponsored by Gerber Life. Lights On with my friend Miles Adcox.
Good to see you.
Man, it's just a pleasure to hang out, and to have you on this pod is important to me. I've been looking forward to it, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm honored you called. And
Yeah.
I would have enjoyed this conversation whether it was on a podcast or not, because it's just been too long.
We were going to have it either way, and I'm like, I might as well film it. I couldn't wait to talk to you, and I'm a little bit frustrated with your hair, how full it is. And how great it is. Is there a way we can get some sort of insight on what's going on there? Is that just from heaven, or?
Well, at first, when I walked in the room, if it was a little warm in the studio here, so you had your jacket off, and I first commented on your physique. I was like, what in the world? So, yeah, same thing.
It's
I learned
overcompensation.
Right away. It's like, how are you more ripped than I saw you years ago?
Yeah, anytime I see a man with the head of hair that you do, I got to find out right now. So if anybody's listening that has any serious intel, we'll take it. But you are... people can do their own research. I feel like I've had my pod long enough to not have to give like in depth about who people are, but a little snapshot on how on earth you end up in the mental wellness space, and not just being in the space, but significantly impacting the world. How does Miles land there?
Well, it was certainly, I didn't get into my world by accident. It was through my own life experience that brought me to the dance, which I really, at times early in my career, I thought, man, did I really need that motivation to have some of my own obstacles and faceplant moments in life to wake me up to the idea that I could potentially be a guide for other people walking through similar parts of their stories. And I thought, man, it'd kind of be convenient if my own story wasn't getting hooked all the time, because I've got my own stuff. But boy, it seasoned well. That part of my narrative has seasoned so well. I think it's just positioned me especially when I continue to pursue my own story. I continue to do my own work. I continue to try to reconcile the parts that brought me to the dance and that keep me at the dance. And at the end of the day, sitting with other people when they're navigating challenging circumstances and trying to help them remove, and we'll just meet them where they are before we even get into the how. Just meet them where they are. I feel like for whatever reason, God gave me the gift of people doing that for me at the right time, at the right place. And I may have been naturally equipped before then, but boy, that equipped me.
Yeah.
When I was on the receiving end of empathy, when I felt like I didn't deserve it.
Yeah.
And I've not really looked back. It's what I love to do and what I feel like I was kind of divinely appointed to do. And so, yeah, I went through some bumpy times in my early 20s, and ultimately found some redemption and started chasing that part of my story and shifted gears, got out of a fast-moving career to get into another fast-moving career. I used psychology, and I hadn't looked back. I've been doing it 20-something years now.
You've done, psychology has been your love for?
Yeah, well, just people. I've always been curious about just the human experience. I was curious about people, and really people and animals. I love animals too, but I was curious in nature, but I was curious just about how things work. I have been since I was a kid. I never intended on doing it, like I said, until I needed it. And then when I was on the receiving end to it was when I really fell in love with it. I was like, wow, you can communicate. There's a language for this. You can communicate this way. You can be with other people in this way. And it was almost like I had been without oxygen for a long time. And then when I got it, I was like, the first time I really breathed deep. And now I value the breath so much, and getting to see other people take that big exhale and their shoulders drop for the first time. Yeah. Especially if they feel like they've been on the receiving end of, when you go through some life, we often deserve some of the critique and judgment that comes our way, but what people underestimate is just how much of it's coming from our own internal, our own place. And we're already masters of giving ourselves a difficult time. And the first time you can see somebody just give themselves a tad bit of relief, call it grace, call it what you will, it's just like, man. And I would say I continue to benefit probably more than I offer. I walk away a better human. But not all. There's been times in my career, which I'm sure if we get into the personal side of things, I'm happy to share, where it came at a little bit of a cost and got burned out and didn't show up the best version of myself. But for the most part, collectively, if I look at all the data, I am by far a better human being, better friend, better leader, better husband, better father, all the things because of this path I've been on. So it's been special.
What a beautiful way to put that. I think you hit on what I love about you, and in this chapter of my life I resonate with a lot, is you're the first one to say you're on that journey. And so often you meet people and they give off a vibe basically like, I've done the work and here I am. Everything you represent is about a process and a peaceful journey and a building, and it's really impacted me. And I'll give people a little bit of context for my first meeting with you. I've learned that sometimes you got to let your eyes do the talking, and you just got to let them do what they do. But even being here with you, it just takes me back. Got to use some Onsite tools immediately. Okay. I was in the throes of the aftermath of a pretty apocalyptic situation where my life had just ran out of road as I knew it, and I was in a significantly dark place, and media reports had broken, and my wife was didn't know what I felt like my brain wasn't working, and he said, "Hey, I got to go, but I'm going to hook you up with Bob. Bob's going to call you." He's talking about Bob Goff, and Bob talked to me for a while, and he said, "Hey, we're gonna get you to our friend Miles. We're gonna get you to Onsite, which is a place in Tennessee." And I was like, "Oh, okay. I don't know if I can. I don't know if there's hope for me, but thanks for the idea." And we talked it through, and somehow Bob and Dino and another friend, they got me in a car. I remember flying to Nashville. I remember getting into the airport. And you got a Kleenex over there, Brother Joe? Whoa. I was about to give an old habited apology, then I remembered who I was talking to.
Yeah.
That's where I learned not to do that. I'm sorry. Okay. And I landed in Nashville, and I couldn't remember why I was there. Couldn't remember where I was. Called my wife. I said, "Hey, I don't know where I am." She said, "You're at the airport." I haven't thought about this since then. So it's like one of those precious things in your soul. So she said, "You're in Nashville and you're going to Onsite." And she called somebody and she said, "Just walk down to this hallway and down to this floor." And I got there and there was someone from Onsite waiting in the car. And they just hugged me, and I don't even remember getting in the car. Barely remember the drive. And I remember showing up. And I stepped out of this car in the hills of Tennessee and just swept on this sweet lake. Whoever was there who receives these people who are tornadoes of disaster. And she just hugged me and she said, "It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay." And I woke up the next day and met you. I remember seeing you come over the sunset like in a movie. You might have even been on a horse. But
Probably was.
And I just remember feeling peace, and you just said, "We love you. You're gonna have a great couple of days," and that was the beginning of me finding hope. And I had none at that time, none. And I was more angry at myself than anybody else. And I just thought, my road has ended, and I'm just here just to figure out what might be, I guess. I got room for that. And I met with my amazing lifelong friend, Carlos. I don't know if we can use names, but Carlos. And for 3 days, he just started to help me unpack things that I didn't even know were packed. Started to help me see patterns I didn't know existed. And I started to realize there's hope in me, and there's love in me, and there's things in me that have been crushed. Some are my fault. Some are not my fault. All of them are my responsibility right now. And I just remember my breath being deeper. It's the first place I ever thought about breathing. I remember getting the little whistles that you guys give, the little breathing things. I bought like 100. And it's the first place I learned how to meditate. It's the first place I learned how to say things out loud that were embarrassing. I remember that part of day one, and I sat there with Carlos. I think this is common because Laura said she had a similar experience, but where you sit there and you say things that you think are going to shock people, and you just get kind eyes from across the table. And it was the beginning of the new road for me, and I've never gotten off that road, ever. And that was in the beginning of COVID. You guys were not open. You bent over backwards to make it happen. And I just wanted to, if the podcast ended with me just being able to thank you, it would have been worth it, because your life's work, impacts so many people. And a lot of people couldn't thank you because they don't get a chance to know you on that level. But I'm not ashamed or bashful to tell people that, I needed and need deep work on my soul. And Onsite is always where I point. So for those, I haven't even given the name of what you've started, but Onsite is obviously the world-renowned, I don't know if you call it a counseling center, a retreat, a respite. I don't know what words might be used, but it's impacted so many people. I'm one of who knows how many. And it's not a fix-all. You don't show up in Tennessee and you leave like whole. In fact, you leave more unwound than you've ever been. I felt like I came home from Target with issues and I just dumped them on the table like, Lord, I don't know what I'm going to do with all this, but I think that I can repair some things. And Laura says that conversation when I got back from Onsite was one of the reasons she gave me an opportunity to keep going. And when you have marriage, infidelity, breakdown, betrayal, it's an everyday decision. And that day was, whatever I told her was enough for her to keep listening. But I'm just really excited for people to keep getting help. And that's why we wanted to do this pod, to be able to point to, hey, you want to talk about real life. This is real. And you really helped the trajectory of my life go into a direction of peace and love. And I'm just so overjoyed to be able to say thank you, look at you in the face and say all the sacrifice that goes into that, only in heaven we really know. But when you, and from there I went to a rehab, and after a rehab, just, daily therapy to weekly to where it is now. And so it's a never ending journey, but that's the beauty of Onsite. It opens you up to, hey, there's a soul in you, and it's time to give that thing some care. When you see people like me, and you've done it your whole career probably, when you see people at their lowest emotional point, is there like a unique thing that you've realized over the years or you've seen that you've picked up? Because I wouldn't be alone. I'm not the only person that showed up in Tennessee hurting, but you see that a lot. What has that done to your impression or your perspective on humanity? Because you see people at their absolute most broken. What's that like?
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't at least, before we get there, thank you for such a kind way to start this. You're right. A lot of times we don't get to see much of the outcome because we'll work with thousands of people a year, and people go back out and do what they're supposed to do, which is just beautiful just to get to see from afar at times. And then every now and then there's acquaintance or proximity that brings people back together. And I am thankful that one of the things we do get to hear a lot in our work is that, things like life-changing and stuff like that, which I never get tired of hearing, but the way you just, in such a meaningful, heartfelt way, just kind of and courageously walk back into that part of your timeline and to reflect back, which clearly was touching to you and touching to me. I just want to thank you for that. And you asked me what I'd been up to when we got in here today, and we probably started ripping off all the things that we're busy doing.
Yeah.
And we're in the middle of a work day.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on there. Stuff going on that led up to this. There'll be stuff going on after that. There's nothing else in the world matters right now but this right here. Just holding that story and hearing it and feeling valued and appreciated. And so I just so respect that. And thank you for sharing what you shared. God, to be with people, there's a lot of creative therapeutic change tools in our space that, I'd like to think that we helped innovate and pioneer some of those, but the reality is they're all just historic old wisdom that just gets retooled. Try to use it in a different way. But one of those is we do something occasionally is a version of kind of role play, whether it's one-on-one or one-on-two, where it's a real visual way to put yourself in another person's shoes. Because we'll say, hey, if you're talking to somebody and telling a part of your story, we'll say reverse roles with that. Come sit in this chair and let's talk to it. Let's talk to that part of your story. So the very first thing that I might try to do if somebody is at their worst is, in my mind, is like reverse roles. And suddenly I don't see a desperate human trying to claw their way back to life. I look over there and I look at myself sitting there at one point in my story. And it's a way for me to be able to step back from my current reality and reconnect to the moment that I'm in and realize this is the moment that matters the most right now. Is here's somebody who is not seeing a lot of hope, who is feeling completely unearthed, who, by the way, is alone. And that's one of the things that I used to, so many things I said 5 years ago, I'm saying different now. And I hope that continues to, hope I continue to refine myself. But one of the things I used to say when people were in those places is I just feel so alone, because you feel so alone. And I used to be like, you're not alone, I'm with you. And what I would say now is yeah, it definitely feels alone in this place. Because what people are starving for in moments like that is there any part of me that has value right now? Whether it be I've made a mistake or I am a mistake or wherever you might be, is there any part of me that has any value? Because without value, it's tough for us to exist.
Yeah.
And so the very first thing I might want to do is try to remind people that there is value. And one of the ways you discover value is to feel validated. And so even if it's a hard thing to grasp, like I'm alone in my story right now, I want to validate that.
Yeah.
Now, is it 100% true? Probably not. There's people that still love you, and I'm somebody that wants to get to know you and love you. But if your perception is I'm sitting alone, then I don't want to change that. I want to join you in it. Because I'm really not going to shift your perspective unless you don't feel alone in your perception of your reality. And so the very first thing I might want to do if somebody's really there is how do I first put myself there so I can be in the right disposition and not be a talking head or an expert and try to drop in tools way too soon. It's the very first thing to do to remove an agenda,
Right.
is to be with the human in front of you. And there's this, not to get too tactical, but there's this thing called the stages of change, which is kind of this there's been some science that they've researched how human beings navigate the change process. And in your case, when what you were describing, or reversal, if I were in your shoes, then that's a stage that we might call pre-contemplative, or that we know something's not working. We're contemplating the concept of letting our walls down and letting somebody in to see if they can help be a guide for us, but we're just on the front end of that. I don't really have a choice. I have to trust it because I'm desperate, but I'm not so sure I trust it because I've just come from a really broken place. And then you got to imagine the people that we're often seeking guidance from are sitting in a stage called action, which is we're sitting over here armed with all these tools.
You're ready.
And one of the mistakes that we make, and I've made it before, I'll make it again, is that out of the discomfort of your discomfort, I'm ready to start throwing tools at you.
Well said.
And it's just too soon.
Yeah.
What I need to do is leave this place that I'm in and join you in pre-contemplation. And so what's the first thing I might want to do if somebody's really, really sitting in a lot of pain is how do I go join them in that? Not to become that pain or get over-identified with it, just so that you can see that here's a human that has been in this hole before and has a path back out of it. Feels a little different than somebody standing up on top of the hole and trying to throw you a ladder.
Yes.
And give you a map. It's like, no, I've been in here before. I'm going to come down here and get with you in it. And it's really, you ask a question that I deeply value, which is probably why I'm talking too much right out of the gate, because
talking perfectly articulately, so please continue.
Thank you. But we could get into the science, the psychology, the neuroscience of moments like that. And I love all the tactical elements too. But if you really strip it all back, it's an energy exchange.
Yeah.
No different than I started my day with my horses this morning, and we had an energy exchange. We exchanged words. They don't speak English, but we had an energy exchange. And it put me in a mindful place. Yeah. And it set my day off on a good stance. And any time that we're with somebody that is stressed, struggling, in pain, the first thing we need to think about is where's my energy, where's your energy, and how can we meet in the middle here?
That is, I wasn't conscious of that energy give on the level I am today. I think it's because you find out you're really self-centered sometimes, and to even be conscious of the energy you're giving is, to a degree, has a selfless nature to it. And I even on the way over here, I was picking up something from the store and just looked at the awesome person sitting there, and I just wonder what's it like working at the Dollar General, this part in Nashville. Wonder what that's like. I wonder how many people say hi, and so I just was intentional in a split second, and it's just funny how that impacts you sometimes even more than the actual person that you're hoping to lift their day. And there's something to that. I think your ability to be present in different situations is what I continually strive to do. Like, there's something about people who do a lot of soul work where, yes, they're busy, but it's like when you talk to you, it's nobody else is around. Is there a method how long did that take for you to get to this stage of that ability to be present? Because for me, that's been a giant swap for my life. Like I've got stories upon stories of being a, mid-30s dad, planting a church in New York, and just running and gunning, and doing the best I knew how to do at the time. I look back at that guy sometimes, and I wish I could just yell through the cosmos like, "Slow down, slow down." And I work hard at that now, of just like learning. Still to this day, when Onsite was that moment of clarity where it's like, you need to get used to being still. And I remember thinking, still, like that is the worst punishment to give anyone on earth. And that's why I always pushed away from what I thought I didn't know when it came to therapy or any work. But what have you done that has helped you maintain a presence of peace? Because if I were to describe you, one of the words I would use is peace. And peace has so much power to it, because if you deal with stress, anxiety, insecurity, peace is not the thing that's going to impact people. So there has to be an element of security about somebody. But what do you do that gets you to a place where your peace becomes a presence, which becomes powerful?
Great question. And I'm careful because I want to receive that affirmation, but I also I want to be careful not to pedestal my peace. Because I have it. I'm thankful for it. I feel like there's a peace of mind in me that does. I hadn't quite heard you say it like that, but I won't forget those 3 P's. The peace creates presence, which creates power. That was really, really well said. But I also have the flip side of peace. I've got anxiety. I've got stress. I move fast. I've built some really cool things.
So you are human.
I'll build some more things. And I have a unique ability at times to be able to find myself in the midst of stressful circumstances and be really present for me and the people in front of me. I'll own that and value it. And I'm human. If we interview my wife, she'll tell you there's a whole nother side of me too that is very, very human, that tends to go too fast. It gets burned out, all the things. And I just think people should know that part of the perspective, that there's in my light, then, that's something I get complimented a lot, affirmed a lot. But there's a shadow side too that I get addicted to presence. I get addicted because it feels like there's such a void of it in the world that as much as you can give it to people one-on-one or one on 1,000, I feel like it outshines words, and every three-step process to optimal living in relationships. Presence really is a gift, and it's a gift when you receive it. It's a gift when you're able to give it. It's really a gift when it's mutually beneficial. But I'm also realistic about it and know that in order to sustain it and maintain it, I think you have to dance with the shadow side of it effectively.
Can you speak to that a little bit? When you say shadow side, can you speak to that a little bit?
Of course. Because a lot of the people that I admire for a certain skill set, often I just see them as that skill set,
right?
Not as who they are. And that's what gets a lot of us that have influence and leadership in trouble, is we start to be identified by our strengths, and unknown by our shadow and our weakness.
Yeah.
And I'm very driven. I'm an entrepreneur. I love impact. I love change. I can't stop ideating. So I move really quickly up here, even though my presence and my cadence and my tone, I got that just, part of that's just being a Southern guy, but I move a little slower on that side. And so I have to often experience the pain of not being present. It happened Saturday morning, and today's Monday. Had a family day, which I'm learning those are really valuable.
Yeah.
There's enough of them because we're always going somewhere, and they're the age they're going somewhere. And I just had a bid for connection from my wife at breakfast that I completely steamrolled. And I'm not going to overshare that. If she was here, I'd share that story, but that's her part to share.
Right.
But nonetheless, I just missed it. It's one of those moments. I just absolutely missed it. I didn't just miss it. I kind of butchered it, And she snapped back, and it kind of set our day off on the wrong tone. I took the kids. We went outside. I'm thankful we get to live on some land, and so we went on a walk. And I was kind of proud of myself for the first half hour, because I'm like, I'm being a dad, and I'm like, I get away from this stressful situation and go take the kids and experience house. And about 30 minutes in, I had a little bit of tug on me, and I was like, oof, That's not a great way to start the day. Certainly won't be a great way to end the day. My kids got to see that. I get an opportunity here to do something about it or just keep marching forward, which either would have worked.
Yeah.
I've done both.
Yeah.
But I've done enough of both that I realize that this one way outweighs the other one. And this that I'm referring to is that I had a moment there that I could look at and say, hey, you know what? I don't much love the way I handled a conversation that you guys saw at breakfast with your mom, and I could have been a little more graceful and kind in that moment, and I'd like to go repair it. And what was interesting is we didn't turn right around because we were. I would say without those teaching moments of not being in peace or missing your partner for connection or just being an ass, when there's an opportunity to be kind. A lot of people wouldn't think that about me. They're like, oh, you're the guy that has all the tools and works and it's like, no, I'm a human at the end of the day. And I need, now, it used to be those moments were such a significant part of my life that it was difficult to balance them out with the piece that I'm after. But now I would say it way outshines that. But I still need them. I used to try to outrun them. I'd be like, I don't want that in my life. I don't want that in my life. And I will experience mastery when I never feel pain or stress. And it's like, wait a minute, then I'll lose my teacher.
Then I'll lose my teacher. Okay, that's powerful. I think, well, there's a bunch of things that you just did there that's just, it's not typical, unfortunately, which I'll get to, but the ability to be honest in front of your kids, to own it, and then use it as something that makes your family stronger is a this chapter revelation for me. And so I resonate with it takes a little bit of change to get there, to like stop, even to say that to your kids. But I told Laura the other day, we had a moment. I'm with you. I used to push back on the challenge, and because I totally have let go of the destination of healing and embrace the fact that this thing is a road that will not end until I say goodbye to this earth. It's given me a lot more peace because it's like I rather than kick myself when I come face to face with a failure, it's like, no, great opportunity. And Laura, I think it could be described probably, I resonate to the shadow side, because known as if you're a public speaker or if you're a pastor, for instance, like people really understand this one part of you. But there's this whole other part of you that I didn't even know. And for instance, I'm an introvert. I've only been able to embrace that this chapter of my life because I spent so many years trying to prove to people that I needed, because if you're a charismatic speaker, people's automatic inclination is that that's how you are 100% of the time. So if they see you at a dinner or whatever, oh, that guy's standoffish, that guy's this, and you start to internalize that, try to act like somebody you're not, then you find out I'm actually just a quiet, shy person. I happen to be really gifted when it comes to that moment and handling that part of, but that shy, introverted part of me used to cause probably some volatility in reaction. And the other day, Laura had forgotten something. And my first instinct was to say something cutting. And I caught myself, which is win number one.
Come on.
And then I doubled down. I said, hey, bummer that we forgot something important. We good?
Yep.
Okay.
Good, sorry.
Bummer that we forgot something important. But having said that, were you more worried about what we forgot or my reaction? She said, I've been panicking about your reaction. I said, Yes, I'm so sorry I built that. Thanks for letting me repair this, because you should never feel like that. It's just not a big deal. So I don't remember what was forgotten. I'm sorry that I've ever made you fearful of my response to any failure you will ever have from this second on. I'm dedicating myself to growing. And it was just this is a regular old Tuesday. It's like, but that's falling in love with the work. That's falling in love with the right kind of pain. And and that stuff builds momentum. So it just is interesting to even hear you use to use probably second nature. It's a powerful tool in there, and I know people who listen to this podcast, I love, and I'm excited about yours, by the way, which is going to get rolling pretty soon. I can take
coming.
But you find there's a culture.
Hopefully, we'll have this conversation again.
There's a culture and a tempo to the people that listen to your podcast. You get to pick up a trend, and I've found that I just meet incredible, couples and men in particular that are just like, hey man, I'm done with the trying to be a tough guy. Like, thanks for talking about stuff and you find out there's like this undercurrent in our culture of men that are really, really looking forward to like a breathing easier. Because that's what some of this work does. Like, it's hard work being somebody you're not really fully cognizant of who they are. It takes a lot of work. And when I look across this table, your influence has reached every sphere. And I'm not, we both know cool people. So it's not like, but what I love about what you do is it doesn't matter the status of a person. My question, which is an interesting one, is from the famous to the non-famous to the, like, do you find it funny that humanity gets us all regardless of what you have? Because I think I've helped people that have huge platforms, and people are always so shocked to hear about their humanity. Like, I'll bet you that guy's not lonely. Oh, you'd be wrong. Or I can't believe that guy isn't a great friend all the time. It's like, do you find that to be striking, that when you're in the operating room of Onsite, which is kind of what it can be sometimes, it doesn't matter what your status was when you got in there. In this circle here, we're just broken humans.
Yeah.
Has that ever stuck out to you?
Yeah, and I love the way you framed it the first time. Do you find that funny? Occasionally it is. I mean, people do think, because I'm a pretty, I kind of carry a flat eye effect a lot of the time. And it's tough for me to let people see my sense of humor. I usually have to know you for a while.
Yeah.
But I'm really a cut up and have a big time. And my wife knows this about me. I laugh a lot. And frankly, in our work, if you don't find some of it funny, patterns and trends, it'd kill you.
You're in
too
trouble.
Much.
Yeah.
And so, there's parts of it that I know that maybe a Freudian slip, but there's parts of it that is, you just have to step back and be like, oh my, really? Seriously? And that's one of them. So I do think that I've learned that regardless of socioeconomic status, regardless of influence, adversity is adversity. Now, there are people that have more means to help get support around adversity, and sometimes I wish that the equality was a little better there. But for the most part, adversity is adversity, and lots of means produce it, no means produce it. And the middle produces. I've never seen really anybody escape it. Adversity is just going to show up.
Yeah.
What I referenced earlier, and I think what you referenced in the beautiful example with you and Laura, is when you can start to become friends with it, it can be a teacher.
Yeah.
And it can go from a teach instead of an excuse, it can become an asset.
Ooh.
Because for a long time, I used it as an excuse. Look what happened to me.
Right.
Can you believe this happened to me?
Yes.
Even in real time, what I was doing, it was actually happening in real time to someone else. My pain was spilling out on another story. I could still personalize it and be a victim of it. And I think we have to be careful of that. That's one of the things I see today in modern psychotherapy, counseling, and it's fun to see it trend. Like, I've been around long enough when it wasn't trending at all. When you think we have a stigma now, we really had a stigma 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, pop culture's kind of grabbed it, and it's kind of gotten hip, sexy, and cool to talk about counseling, talk about therapy, talk about personal. Is there still a stigma attached? You bet. It's way bigger, more layered than you think. But there are more voices out there talking about it. But often, as anything, once it gets grabbed by the masses, it gets interpreted by the masses.
Yeah.
So suddenly you got a lot of experts, which is, I'm thrilled by it, because it just, more voices are talking, which is more influence is happening, and more people are realizing I can lay down the act, like you said. But there's some of it that I think gets a little misinterpreted and overbaked and weaponized. And so now we're seeing a lot of therapeutic things get weaponized, like trauma gets weaponized, narcissism gets weaponized. We end up using it if we're stressed or in a fight. Or if you looked at me the wrong way, I might, by the end of it, say, you really caused me some trauma by doing that. That's not trauma as we know it. It might activate some old stuff for me, but it's not trauma.
Or even putting labels on people. You have no business labeling people. Hurtful, big, you're this, you're that.
I say that because I think women have been faster to adapt, to be interested in, and therefore consume personal growth, self-development, working on yourself. That concept comes a little more natural to those with a higher EQ, and they, by nature, have a higher EQ than we do. men have to work at it. You were referencing about a lot of men are ready to drop the tough guy act.
Yeah.
And I think when they hear that, sometimes it starts to drift in that toxic masculinity lane, which turns a lot of guys off.
Yeah.
It turned me off early on because I
Really?
grew up a man's man. I hunt, I fish, I ride horses. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not your atypical sensitive therapy guy, but I cry in movies all day. I've got access to my tears. So it's kind of I usually think, well, that's a bit of an anomaly. You got to be one way or the other. You got to have grit. You got to be a foxhole guy, or you got to have emotion. You got to be
Right.
sensitive and like chick flicks. And actually, you can be both.
Yeah.
I've proven you
Yes.
can be both. And I want people to know that you don't have to give up your man card to get a little bit more emotional intelligence on board. You have a little bit more sensitivity on board.
Yeah.
Because I still have all that. I'm still a guy you'd want to have your back in a tough situation. And I'm somebody that can cry with you if you're really going through a difficult situation. And I think both, regardless of gender, I want more people to be able to hear that.
Yeah.
I went down a different path from what you
did not.
initially asked
That's
me.
the path we should be on, because I hear you saying, like, you said it in a clear picture, because I feel like I, to a degree, am able to try to hold up that, or at least shine a light on that part of this as well, because I'm with you. I love basketball, and I'm happy to fight if it's right. But man, I am almost more honored to sit Indian style with you. If we got to hold hands, like I told a young guy, because young guys still say pause. Like if you say, hey man, you look cool today, they'll say pause. The inference being, I don't mean it in a romantic way. And I said, man, I'm 46. I've been through enough furnaces in my life where if I want to tell you something nice, I'm not qualifying it with a pause, or I don't mean it like that. Like if you can't handle it, hey, you have great eyes, or well said on that speech you gave. I'm not qualifying it to make sure you know my sexuality or whatever. Like, I love that leaving, because it's so dumb and fruitless to even live with that kind of a dance, And I think this is public knowledge, and we can obviously move past it if you don't love it. But I think I was listening to my friend Andrew Schultz, and he had, I guess it was Jelly Roll on there, and he kept referencing the guy that Jelly you had with you over and over on this interview. And the way he started describing it, because and Jelly Roll was like, oh, yeah, it's my friend Miles. And I was like, that's my friend Miles. But the way he talked about you was so funny, because Jelly Roll represents, to many things, he's a paradigm shatterer, in that, like, we needed somebody that has tattoos on their face, gold in their mouth, and kindness in their voice to be like, hey, I can out-rap you if you want. I can make the coolest songs in my sleep. Also, I got to leave early because I'm going to therapy. Like, people like Jelly Roll are problems for the prison of shame. He is a problem for the prison of image. And I feel like that could be something we see more of. And I know you've had an impact on people like him, and I love that. Do you see the man narrative changing? Do you feel like that's a lofty dream that I'm looking at, or do you feel like it's legit? Do you feel like there's a shift in culture where men are starting to get to a place where they're like, this definitely isn't working?
Yeah, I do. I think that we have a tendency to overcorrect. I've used that word a few times, but I think we do that culturally in society too. And so I agree that at times it got a little toxic, and it got where you couldn't talk about your feelings. And I said, yeah, I get that. But then our correction was, we went this way. And I think now we're starting to move back this way a little bit, so that you can be more of who you are, which is a complex human being. You can have different parts of yourself show up, and the more integrated you are, the better. And what you referenced, and you brought it back around talking about Jelly, and I've worked with a lot of public people. You referenced that earlier, and you have too, I know. And there's something interesting about working with public professions, because they have these abnormal life circumstances. And we know abnormal life circumstances, and we could name them if we had time, but most people can just assume the challenges that fame brings. But when you have a big enough platform, it comes with abnormal life circumstances. We know that abnormal life circumstances from my lane create high levels of stress. We also know that unaddressed stress creates anxiety, loneliness, addictions, depression, anxiety, strained relationships, burnout, etc. All of which ironically kill connection and creativity. A lot of really well-connected and super creative people end up with influence. And as it turns out, you're signing up for a career that's designed to kill the gift that brought you to the dance. Isn't that an interesting paradox?
Very.
But what's beautiful is you take a guy like Jelly and you talk about him breaking through glass ceilings, and it's like he's turning a lot of what it means to be famous on its head.
Yeah, he is.
Because when's the last time you saw somebody with as much influence as he's having right now be as approachable and as humble as he is to the world? And that's a bit of you kind of know what to do with it.
Yeah.
You're like, well, he's everybody's guy. He's the guy I grew up with that couldn't get his stuff together.
Yeah.
Or now he's got his stuff together, and wait, can he say that as that guy? And he's saying it, and it's very earnest. It's very authentic. And I've been fortunate. There's so many people I've worked with that nobody will ever know I've worked with it unless they share. But he was one right up front. And I work with lots of people, and I usually don't get too anchored into one camp, especially on the music and artist side,
Right.
or athletes or whatever, because I love. But he up front was like, no. He said, if there was ever a guy that the world needed to know they had a mental health guy, a mentor, whatever you want to call yourself, if you want to be my mentor, that's fine. Sure. He said, but he said, I'm going somewhere to do something important. I am going somewhere to do something important. And he even used a football metaphor, which I hesitate to say because I never put myself in that category with the goat. But what was it he said? He said, you're, and I know, because when he first approached me and said, I'd like to do some work with you, and it was before I knew he was going to make it very public, and I would have to agree to be public for this to work, he said, look, I'm going to places that I feel like people hadn't gone for reasons that I don't think people have gone there for. This is bigger than the music. This is about a mission. This is about redemption for me. And I said, and I'd already told him, I was like, buddy, you're tied to a rocket. This is 2 or 3 years ago. And I said, you feel like it's left the ground, but it hadn't even left the ground yet. And I said, it's going to come to a point where it's going to leave the ground, and you're going to ask a lot of questions about who you are, why you're here, what was the point. You're going to lose a lot of autonomy. You're going to not be able to have any control anymore. Everybody's going to be around you doing lots of your life, and it will be beautiful, and it will be exhausting, and you're going to start asking questions like, why did I do this? And he called me and repeated every word I'd said to him 2 years earlier. And he said, what I'm asking is that I want to go to the Super Bowl. And I said, good. I've got lots of great players. I got lots of team members. I didn't use those metaphors. So I said, I got a great team behind me. I can hook you up and get your resource. And he said, you're telling me we're going to go to the Super Bowl, and you're telling me I'm going to put Brady on the sideline. He said, you're coming with me. And I never forgot that.
Wow.
But I was also as attached to the message and the redemption story that he wanted to get out there. And he's touching a demographic that I often don't get to touch. And we've been having a ball. So we did a full tour last year and tried to create similar to what you and I are passionate about, what you described as your experience in like an on-site setting in an arena with 15,000 people. Yeah. Could you do that? Still let them have fun, whatever, party, enjoy the music. It's fine for a party crowd. But at the end of the day, can we have a moment where the lights are up and everybody's hugging a stranger? Can we talk about the person in the first row that's 3 months clean? We talk about the mom that lost her kid to addiction. Can we give them a moment, put the spotlight on them? Let's read their sign and let's tell them we love them and that they belong here. And he's one of the best orators I've ever been around. But I've literally been watching us take what for me it lines up with my faith, with this message of love and grace, and taking it to people that don't even feel like they deserve it. What's amazing is the minute they get it, watching them turn the lights on and stop studying it but start living it, it's like, I want to be a part of that. So that's working with influence is challenging. Not because the people are challenging. It's just the machine around them is pretty challenging.
It's tough.
But I've learned it's worth it because there's a downstream impact that I'll never be able to measure. And it's the one I'm most excited about. Everybody talks about legacy, and I think legacy gets overplayed a little bit because we're going to go and it's going to be what it's going to be. But there's a downstream impact that I almost think is more attractive, more meaningful, and more enjoyable when I don't even know where it's going or how big it is. I just know it's going because I get to watch it through other people, through you. You know, it was just a tiny little intersection in your story. I mean, you were going to get there. I believe you were destined to get where you are today, which is being a voice for the voiceless and hope for the hopeless, and leaning into the courage of your redemption story, sharing it so vulnerably. To now in a course, you know, you've stepped into something else, and the numbers are, I don't even know, but I see it everywhere. So I know you've found some success, and you got a saint of a wife that's right beside you doing it. And I was a small part of that story. And you're going to probably reach more people than I might in my career with that microphone in front of you if you keep doing what you're doing. And I got to be a small part of that story, that downstream impact. And that's my favorite part. That's why I love getting to do it.
I think you might not be comfortable with the Tom Brady analogy that Jelly used, but he nailed it. Oh. You're a general, and I think it's awesome to see. There's just a brighter day coming for people, and you've hit on a couple of things, and it's funny because before I knew that Jelly worked with you, I was like, this brother's been to Onsite. I remember saying that. I saw him do an interview. I said to Laura, there's no way that Jelly hadn't been to Onsite. And then, of course, just because of the cadence of his delivery of his own struggle, that comes through confidence. So for somebody to be able to sit there and not hedge on it, to not even blink, like that, Onsite was where I began to, hear God's voice on some of that stuff. Like, because I struggled with feeling like I don't even know if I deserve to. And I remember Carlos looking at me a couple times, going, does what? Like, you don't deserve love? Like, you don't, like, presenting questions that I hadn't really even contemplated. And then when you start to hear some of that stuff, and God does His work of kind of locking that in your soul, you're tough to move. Jelly's probably tough to move. You're tough to move. You're going to go through your challenges, like we all will. But Miles, it would be a stretch for me to say something that would hurt you, because you're pretty confident here. And I think that's my heart for men that I love in my life. It's like you nailed it. Therapy it's become a little bit cooler, but anything that becomes cool loses some of its essence if you're not careful. I've been a part of a church world that's like that. Like, it goes from being a niche to like mainstream, and then all of a sudden it's like, no, everybody's doing the same thing, and now it's like therapy now is like putting Christian in your Facebook check, like I'm a Christian or a religion or other therapy. That's not what we're speaking to. We're speaking more to the beautiful journey of learning who God created you to be. And accepting some of the painful, I don't know if I have any emotional strength left to even dip into one of the, but like sitting in a chair in the middle of these mountains in Tennessee, as Carlos walks me through meeting myself at a very vulnerable age.
You remember the age?
Yeah, I do. And it gets me every time I think about him. And I never would have thought to do that. I never would have had the courage to be vulnerable enough to even get there. And that's my hope for the people that I do have an opportunity and a privilege to influence, is to be able to say, hey, get around some people that'll make you uncomfortable in the best ways. Like, I've never been more uncomfortable than I was at Onsite. And I've chosen to stay that way. And I told you before we cut on this interview, I would probably evangelize about Jesus first, Onsite second. Some days it's a toss-up. I'm kidding. Relax. But I feel like it's such a beautiful bridge for people. And I had a friend he's been through a lot of pain and a lot of loss. And I just said, man, I love you too much to keep having coffee with you. Like, let's press stop on this. And I told you my line about Onsite, which is, worst case scenario, you're going to come back better than you've ever been. What the F are you doing? Let's go. And he came back a couple days ago, and he had that tired, but hey, I'm madder. I'm not going to let that stuff get me. And I just remember thinking, this is, if we could leave people, I know we're right on time here, for the men that are reticent perhaps to really explore this, but they're listening. They might try to act like they're not listening, but what do you say to men? And this is for Laura gets so many wives planting questions for me, which is awesome. They'll be like, can you have Carl ask about this? Because my husband won't talk, or my husband won't communicate, or let's just say there's a man right now who's been thinking about this and he's never done any work. And I'm 46 years old. The first time I set foot in a truly therapeutic setting was 41 years old. It's not okay. grateful for it. Now I look back at that, I'm like, there's a reason why. It's cool. I'm going to use it. But what do we say to those men who are on that line of like, maybe I don't have to become a complete softie, or maybe it's not going to turn me into like, what do you say? Because this is your life's work. And for the hesitant, the reticent among us, I got a friend of mine who's just starting this work, and I had to convince him that 50 was not too late to become the most epic you. He's like, how much? Because really, sometimes a pushback is just a front for I don't know if I can change. And I actually love being 46. I like being in the seat I'm in, because if I can, you can. It's all I want to get guys on site at 20. I want my 15-year-old son to learn these tools, and I will launch tears across this table if I talk about how I'm already doing it.
Come on. Wow.
Like, my son will have tools that are second nature that I didn't even know existed till I was in my 40s. Like, that to me is a beautiful, graceful God that we serve. But can you speak to that for a second in regards to the guys who are thinking about it? Because there's never been a better time to find healing.
Gosh, what a thoughtful question. And I'm so moved by the part about your son. I'd love to camp out and talk about that for another hour, because I'm trying to instill some of those tools and mirror some of that to my kids. And it's always tough to know, is it enough or is it not enough? Am I doing enough of it? But man, that was beautiful the way you shared that. But, you know, there's part of me that I feel a responsibility in some ways to try to, it's not that I want to keep people out of adversity or pain, because I said earlier, I think it's inevitable. And no matter how much power I might think I have, you don't get to do that. You know, people are going to experience challenging circumstances in their life. But if I can make the landing a little softer, and then I think I can give them a better chance to experience and receive the gifts, maybe even sooner than I got to. Because I think that's what we're all after. I got to do it a little before you did, age-wise. But all I can think about is, boy, if I could have picked that up at 20 or 19. Could you imagine some of the heartache and pain and the almost and I got myself in some real pickles, you know. And they were great teachers too, but they also came with a significant amount of pain that still impact me today, still shows up today in stressful life circumstances, some of the experiences that I had. And so I guess I would say, you know, some people look at an on-site experience as like the high dive. Or, well, if you're a guy that's never talked about your story, you may look at going to a counseling session as the high dive and the pool doesn't have any water in it. You know, it just seems like insurmountable. And you've probably been told, and you might even catch some of that inflection from our conversation, that you need that. And I'd be lying if I didn't think that was true. I'm that bought into it.
Yeah.
But I think I would remove need and plug in deserve. And I would just say to anybody listening out there that you don't need anything, but you deserve all of it. And if you desire to enrich your life and to have depth in your relationships and to have a relationship with your faith beyond what you thought was even possible, if you desire to take the things that bring you fulfillment and joy and supercharge those, you know, the things that I love to do, I love them so much more now because I've had deep conversations and I can get vulnerable with other people. And I have way much more joy in my life, more fun. It kind of accentuated a lot of the good and it turned down a little bit of the challenging. And it can be traditional counseling. I'm an advocate for it because we're some good people, you know, but it can be a conversation. It can literally be a conversation and share something about your story you may never showed before, something that you may not see a lot of value in. But if I could do anything, if downstream again, it would, how do we take a place like Onsite, which I don't want to downplay. I try not to talk about it because I'd like for us to be as attractive or engaging as like what we talked about with Jelly. For some reason, well, I think we kind of have a hunch why he's so approachable is the word I was looking for. I'd love for us to be approachable. Yeah. And why is he approachable? Well, he's got a heck of a redemption story. It's all over his face. But he also is a hot mess, and he talks about his mess.
Yeah.
And he's got a great message.
Yeah.
It's not one or the other. It's not like here's the haves, here's the have-nots. We have it together, you guys don't have it together.
Right,
Try your
right.
best to stay out of this club. There's never been a club. There's no lines. It's just we treat it that way. But suddenly when the lines drop and we all get to be together and realize there's a part of me that has it together and there's a part of me that's a hot mess.
Yeah.
We get to turn our mess into a message. And it's the most rewarding, most meaningful, most beneficial thing I've ever done is being able to share the goodness of what I call, it's God. It's my relationship. I share the goodness of God. I get to go around and do that. And I don't have to do anything. I don't have to earn it. I don't even have to say anything. I just get to live my life in a way that ideally somebody else might see it and be like, oh, that's interesting. I'm curious. So there's it's a Ted Lasso quote. Probably somebody else, definitely somebody else's quote. He actually quoted somebody that said it, and I can't remember who to give credit for the quote is. But it was, did you watch Ted Lasso by chance?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm ready for another one. Come on, somebody write another show like that.
Yeah.
But it was very famously when he was on the darts.
Yeah.
I won't be able to recall it, Grace, if he was throwing darts and it was this big bet they were having with the team owner.
I love this scene.
His ex-husband threw that.
Yeah.
And he recited that quote because he was down and he had to get, let me see if I can remember this, 2 triple 20s and a bullseye,
Yeah.
which is impossible to do.
Yeah.
And he said, what do I got to get again? And the guy, they all kind of laughed. It's like, that's impossible. And he said, Rupert was the guy's name.
Yeah.
He said, I saw this sign one time and it said, be curious, not judgmental. And I really liked that. He said, because if you were curious, you might have asked me, Ted, have you ever played darts before? And to that I would have said, why, yes, Rupert, I have. Every day from 10 to 16 before my dad passed away at a local bar. He burst triple 20. And then he kept talking, said more beautiful things, secretary, and then he hit the bullseye. So I would say to all the guys out there, particularly, if you're sitting in some judgment about yourself or other people, just be curious. Give yourself, you deserve a seat at the table like all of us. You deserve to have deeper conversations. You can still be a badass and you can still be a sensitive soft side too. Both of them can coexist. And that was a lot I had to say. But I think in some ways, when you ask me questions like that, I feel like I'm talking to myself in a way 20 years ago.
You're speaking to hearts, and my only request is that you let me invite myself again to your beautiful office to have more conversations, because it's a beautiful path that God has graced you to carve. And again, let me reiterate this: anybody watch, if somebody can't take an Onsite step, can you give just an easy, maybe what can somebody do today? And you hit it on the head earlier with even a conversation's helpful. Laura had texted me. She said, "Ask Miles this for me. Like, what's a helpful segue or whatever for somebody who maybe Onsite is a destination that it's in the future, but what can somebody do today that might help them just start to feel maybe a little bit more air, a little bit more peace? What can they do?"
I love that of course she asked that question. I love that she asked that question. I want to contemplate it just because it means more coming from her in a way.
Yeah.
I want to say what I said earlier, which is just pick up the phone and call somebody. But I know the phone feels like 1,000 pounds when you're sitting in a mountain of shame. But don't hesitate the power of being able to write down the truth that's never been told. So I would encourage you to, and you can write it around and you can burn it right after.
Yeah.
You don't have to start journaling. I'm not going to be that guy that, puts you too far out there too soon.
Yeah.
But if it's too painful to speak, then maybe you can write it. And if it's a truth that's never been told, you'd be surprised how writing it might start to inch you towards freedom in a way that you haven't experienced before. And writing it might be a bridge for you to be able to say it. Saying it might be a bridge for you to be able to look at it. Looking at it might be a bridge for you to be able to have a little grace and empathy for yourself for it. And then you might be able to start to heal from it.
Nothing more needs to be said on that. Someone's going to do that today, and it's going to be the beginning of them metaphorically writing a new chapter. I'm going to put as much info as I can about Onsite and places like it for the next couple of weeks. So if anybody's listening and you're interested, there's a reason why you tuned in to this podcast today to hear from somebody who's has a lot of equity, a lot of weight in the ring. And I think on behalf of so many, Miles, and I know it's an awkward thing sometimes just to take it, but you know, for you and your sacrifice and your family, thank you. So many people are walking around with bigger smiles today, you know, because of the ground has been tilled, and it's a real pleasure and an honor to be your friend, and I look forward to seeing the continued special impacting road that God has you on. So thank you for caring about people when they're at their worst and cheering them on when they're at their best. Both make you really special. So
you said something earlier that you said it'd probably be hard for me to say something hurtful to you. And I was going to challenge that because I was like, you'd be surprised. I'm still pretty sensitive. I can get hurt, but it's what I do with that hurt that may be different.
Yes.
But I'll say there is something that I don't even want to outgrow, because I think it is it's the lifeblood or energy that keeps me moving in a way, which is I went so much of my life just not believing in myself. And that still comes up from time to time, especially when the stakes are high and there's things that matter. And I constantly surround myself with really talented, good people.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's easy to get into that. Have I got this or have I got? Yeah. I can tell in a conversation where belief sits when it comes to an interchange. And a gift that you've given me the times that we've ever sat across from each other is I can tell you believe in me. And I just want to thank you for that. I appreciate you believing in me and believing in what I do. It really, I don't take it for granted. It means a lot. This was an enriching conversation.
It's my blessing, and I do believe in all you're doing. Lights on with my friend. Until next time.
Until next time. A lot more to talk about.